So we're going to cover 3 different refinishing techniques in this video of refinishing grade 2 titanium, because titanium is supposed to be super easy to refinish. At least that's the rumor. I have a stock link from Tudor, and then I'm going to show you each of the other links using each other different process to refinish compared to the original in macro shots as well as wider shots. Welcome to Wrist Swap. My name is Harrison. Today with the Pelagos 39, the Tudor Pelagos 39, we're going to focus on 3 main topics, and we're going to go through them in this order. The first is, now that I've had it for about 9 to 10 months, how do I feel about the watch? Is it different for me? Am I going to get rid of it? Now, I typically get rid of watches around this time frame, about 10 months to a year. Around the summer, I typically buy and replace the watch that I got the year prior. It just seems to be a pattern for me the last 4 years. So how do I feel about it now that I'm at that point? The second topic is actually our sponsor, and that's Artem Straps. We're going to be talking about other options than the bracelet for the Tudor Pelagos 39. Because it's a 21 millimeter lug width, what does that mean for straps? What does a 20 millimeter look like? How do I like it? What do I typically wear it on? And in this case, we're going to also talk about the sponsor, which is Artem Straps, and how do I like this sailcloth strap as basically an elevated version of a water-resistant strap, which is a nice dynamic for someone like myself. So we'll get into that. And then the third one is the one most of you are probably interested in. I'll have chapters in the links below. But the third one is going to be refinishing techniques of the Tudor Pelagos 39. Because the watch is titanium, it's a grade 2 titanium. It means it's less scratch resistant than a stainless steel. Now, keep in mind that any watch you put next to steel or you put in an environment where it could get scratched runs the risk of getting scratched. So there's not a huge amount of difference between titanium and stainless steel. Sure, the numbers are different in terms of their hardness scale, but the actual wearing experience for me, I didn't notice it scratch more or less. What I noticed was that the scratches were more visible because it's a dark gray. Even though that would immediately oxidize, I would notice the scratches if they were specific types of scratches. Not small ones, but longer ones. I would notice the sheen difference between the original dark or dull gray and a slightly brighter line across the bracelet. So that's why I wanted to refinish it, and that's why we'll cover that. So the first thing is going to be, how do I feel about the watch? And I love it. I'm 10 months in, and typically, like I said, this is where I start to rethink the watch a little bit. And I've gotten there with most watches. I did not get there with the Explorer, the Rolex Explorer. I loved it, and I still love it. Nothing's changed on that. The Explorer 2, I did a little bit several months ago. I definitely got there with the Black Bay 58, which is why I sold it. I got there with the Speedmaster, which is why I sold it, although I miss it. But I got there with that one as well. And this one, this Pelagos, it fits my life very, very well. And that's why I don't want to let it go. Granted, I know the aesthetic is very boring. I'm aware of that. I'm also aware that for most people, they have different preferences, whether they want it to be loud, whether they don't like titanium, all that stuff. They feel it's too light. I don't care. For my life, it fits it perfectly. What I need is a watch that can kind of scale the boundaries between a meeting that I might have with a vendor. If I meet with the CEO of some vendor of a company that I want to, feel like I'm wearing a watch that is more upscale, or not, a G-Shock, and I feel it's important to dress nicely and have a watch. And when I say nicely, keep in mind, I don't wear suits very often. So I'm saying like a polo or a button-up shirt, okay? I want to wear a watch that fits that, but also could fit me walking around the warehouse and, running the CNC machine, operating the saw, drilling out a part, jigging it, going into the weld cage. Any of that stuff, I want a watch that can also fit into those environments without being loud, because you can't wear a solid gold Rolex while you're walking around the employees that you have employed, because then they get the impression that you have paid yourself far too much. So I have to wear something that's a bit more subtle. This fits that. It's rugged. It gives me the bezel action I want. It gives me the layout I want, the proportions, the way it's laid out with the indices and the markers, everything about it. I swear this watch, it was almost like it was built for what I wanted. And I said that when I got it. I said that when it was released. I said that, several months ago. I'm saying it again now. So I'm not going to cover it too much beyond the fact that I freaking love this watch. It's perfect for me in my daily life. The second topic is going to be different straps or different options of ways to wear the Pelagos 39. It does have 21 millimeter lugs, which people don't like. And I don't blame them for not liking it because it means you can't wear the huge stock of 20 millimeter straps that you probably have. Every single one of the watches that I own is a 20 millimeter lug width, other than this watch. And it bothered me. And I think it should bother me because it's got a little extra gap that I just feel like is just not why. I didn't need to have that difference of lug width for this watch. It very easily could have been made with 20 millimeter lugs. So what are the workarounds? Now, typically when I first got it, I wore it on the bracelet all the time, which is why I got scratched like crazy, which is why we're going to talk about refinishing here in a second. But I also wore it on NATOs a decent amount, 20 millimeter NATOs. I did not buy a 21 millimeter NATO. I still don't own a 21 millimeter NATO because I didn't care about the extra gap. It didn't really bother me. My favorite by far, actually, shout out to Bark & Jack, was a Bark & Jack NATO strap because it was, I think the material is called a seatbelt nylon. Basically, it means it's a smooth nylon. And so it's nice and soft and it feels premium. It just feels nice. So I wore it on this James Bond No Time to Die style NATO strap from Bark & Jack, and I wore it like that for months. The thing that I would find on any NATO strap is the fact that you never can find a hole that's the perfect size for your wrist. Either it's way too tight or it's just a little too loose. Now, I'm someone that likes it to be snug. Now, if you're someone that it doesn't care, you like your NATOs a little loose, perfect, you're fine. You'll be able to find a hole that fits what you want. But I like it snug where it doesn't move very much, and I couldn't find a hole that was perfect for that. That's just one of the problems with NATO straps. So I switched to a rubber strap because I sweat all the time at work when I'm in the warehouse. So I felt like it was important to have a little bit more of a water repellence. So I switched to a Tropic strap. Now you'd ask me, why wouldn't you wear Tudor's stock rubber strap? And the reason why is I like the Tropic strap that I have. I like the way the lugs of a watch look when the strap is integrated all the way up to the watch case itself and does not have end links. When I put the Tudor end links on the watch with the rubber strap, I just felt like the head of the watch was too beefy now. Like the end links made it too beefy, and without the bracelet, they looked off. So that's why I just didn't like the look. Plus the fact that I wanted to not use that strap very much. I like it, but it's a little stiff. I like a little bit more of a flexible and a more tapered strap. So I used the Tropic strap and it was perfect. I mean, it fit everything I wanted in a strap other than the fact that it was 20 millimeters and I didn't love it enough to buy another $100 rubber strap. So I used that for a long time. And then Artem called or emailed, but they said, hey, we've got these straps. Do you want us to send you some? If you don't like them, that's fine. Just send them back. Don't grill us online. They didn't say don't grill us online, but I read that in between the lines. And so I said, okay, sure. Send them. I'll take a look at them. I took them out of the wrapping. And my first thought was, I'm not entirely sure how much I like them because they're padded. They're a little thicker than what I'm used to. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to wear them. And I have to say, I freaking love these straps. Because this one, especially that I have on the Tudor, I use their deployant clasp, which deployant clasps sometimes can be really sharp, which make them really uncomfortable. But this guy is not. It's nice and cut on the edges so that you don't have any of those sharp edges that dig into your skin. But this deployant clasp makes it phenomenal because it stays in the shape of my wrist always. And so it's great. Once these are broken in and are wrapped around and are used to the shape of your wrist, I've been wearing this almost nonstop for a month now, and it still looks new. The outside of the strap still looks new, and I have definitely sweat a lot in it. So it's got this rubber inside, and then it's got the sailcloth outside. And so it gives you a nice elevated look on the outside that's still water resistant. And then obviously that rubber on the inside is great in making sure that you don't get a soppy, wet strap like I used to get with NATOs. So as I said, been wearing it like crazy, been incredible. These do have quick release spring bars. This is a 21 millimeter strap because I emailed them and said, if you're going to send me straps, please send me something for my Pelagos that's 21 millimeters so I can have at least one. So they sent me that. They did send me a couple other straps in 20 millimeters, which I've been wearing on my Rolex Explorer 2, which you can see here. And I love it. I mean, again, once they break in, if you guys are interested, please link down below. It's not an affiliate link at all. They're not paying me. I just love the strap and I want to link it so that if you're interested, you can find it. So I really like these. If you want a strap that you're going to buy and wear for a long time that's water resistant but a little elevated, these are perfect for that. Absolutely love them. So thanks, Artem, for that. All right, so let's be honest about the finishing, or refinishing, I should say, of the Pelagos. Now, I did not refinish the case. I only refinished the bracelet. And I think there's a big difference between the two because the case itself is the majority of the value. It's the majority of what people look at on the watch. I think if you're going to refinish the case, do it lightly and maybe not with my recommendation. Also, when it comes to refinishing, just keep in mind also that I'm a man on the internet. I have done some of this stuff. I've tried some of this stuff. I researched it, but it doesn't mean that I have the answer. It doesn't also mean that I keep you from making mistakes. I made mistakes when I was refinishing it. So just keep in mind, if you're worried about this or you think it's silly, that's fine. But I would take your watch to a watchmaker first. I am someone that likes to tinker and try things and go for it, even if I'm not entirely sure I'm going to do it correctly, which is, again, why I did the bracelet and not the watch face. I knew if I needed to get it repolished to fix my mistake, I could do that. So now that we've explained that, there's 3 different ways that people primarily refinish titanium, at least that I could find on the internet. One of those is a Scotch-Brite pad. That's a very popular way to refinish steels and titanium. Now, Scotch-Brite has different levels of grit. It's like a sandpaper or a version of sandpaper made out of nylon. Now, I tried some Scotch-Brite pads because I had seen people recommend around a 320 to 400 grit just to take out some deep scratches. And granted, it works. The problem is you really have to keep stepping it down. And I really didn't like this method because it requires you, 1, to have a Dremel, and 2, to know how to use a Dremel, which, while I could do some of that, I'm not an expert, and I don't think most people out there are experts in using a Dremel. So that's why I mainly focused on the 2 other methods, but I'll show you real quick what it looked like with the Scotch-Brite pad on a 400 grit versus what the original Link looked like. And you can see a huge difference there in the grooves, the depth of the grooves. The original is much more refined. It's a much finer finish, which is what you'd find also on like wood tables. They start on a really heavy, aggressive sandpaper, and then they move down from there, or up in grit, I should say. The higher the grit, the finer each of those passes is. So this is, again, a 400. It's not ideal for refinishing watches. You should probably step it up even further. If you're going to do a Dremel, it's a great way to do it. If you're practiced, you could refinish the whole watch using something like this. I would caution just to make sure that you practice a lot and fix the Dremel to a spot so that it's held, and then you bring the watch to it and actually refinish it that way. Now, the other 2 methods I thought were interesting. One was an ink eraser. Now, an ink eraser operates a lot like a Scotch-Brite pad, to be honest with you. It's an abrasive compound. And so it does a very good job at taking out scratches. I will give it that, especially when you sit there and rub at it. And you can see the flakes that come off have metal in them. And so what I liked about the ink eraser method was the fact that you can watch it as you do it, and you're probably not going to take too much off at once because regardless of the amount of pressure, for the most part, you're not going to make massive gouges into the metal. So the ink eraser was really good at that. The problem I had with it was it felt a little dull, and it really didn't refine the Link back to the original, which again, you can see here. It looked close-ish, but not quite as refined, I would say, as the original Link itself. So bring in the 3rd method. Now, the 3rd method is a fiberglass pen. And I have links down in the description below of each of these items that I used. The fiberglass pen is important to make sure that you run it in lines so that you keep each of these lines parallel to the last. So that's the only thing that requires kind of a practiced hand, or at least it requires you to, be careful as you're doing it. I definitely would recommend to wear a loop as you try and refinish it. So get one of the headbands that holds the loop and the loop itself to be able to see what you're doing as you're doing it. But I found that the refinishing method with the fiberglass pen gave me the best results, or the closest results to the original link, which you can see that in the video here. I just felt like the groove finishing was the closest. It's a little too matte. For whatever reason, the grooves don't look quite the same. They're close, but the link itself looks a little more dull than it used to. One of the things that I also thought was really interesting was I'll show you a side-by-side of what the bracelet of the Pelagos originally looked like versus what it looks like now. And I had some really deep scratches in the bracelet clasp itself because I had a puppy. I have a puppy, but at the time, the puppy was wearing a metal collar all the time. And at that time, the puppy was like 70 pounds, 80 pounds, because it's a Doberman, so it's a big dog. And so I ended up with many different circumstances where the dog would move and hit the clasp on the watch and scratch it pretty deeply. So, one of those things that happens. But when I was refinishing it, I wanted to see if I could get those scratches to be as little noticeable as possible. Obviously, when you're trying to get scratches out, the more you work at them, the more metal you're removing. So I wanted to remove metal enough to be able to see the scratches less often than I saw them before, which is part of the reason why I wanted to refinish it in the first place, was this clasp. So what you're seeing here is a combo. I did the ink eraser to begin with, just to really take off a decent amount of the metal on the top of the watch. And then I came back in after that with the fiberglass pen to try and get it to look, finishing-wise, closer to the original links themselves. And I felt like this was the perfect method of those two things, was to have the ability to take scratches out, relatively deep scratches out with the ink eraser, and then to finish it to where it looked close enough to the original. And so the bracelet clasp isn't perfect. I'm not saying that it is exactly the way that it was when I bought it, but it's pretty darn good. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the different refinishing methods, or if there's one that I forgot. Help each other out down there. I'll try and chime in as well, anything that I see or anything that I noticed. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.